Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today we're doing something completely new. This is an Atezr laser. It's a 36 watt laser sent to the channel by Atezr for review. I know there's tons of applications in the RC hobby for these laser cutters and engravers. I can't wait to take a look at this thing. Before we get started, I need to let you know this video is sponsored by Atezr, who sent the laser for review. I'll have a link in the description if you'd like to buy one for yourself. And it just so happens that Atezr's running a sale right now with $400 off this 36 watt laser. The second thing I'll tell you is that when it comes to lasers, you are literally about to watch a monkey with a football because I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe that's why Atezr sent it to me. They wanted to see a non-laser channel, take a look at their laser engraver and see what it's like to set it up and put it into use. So that's my plan. The first thing we're going to do is take it out of the box, and the reason I want to show you the actual unbox is because when you buy expensive devices like this, it's nice to see just how much care they put into the packaging, and I wanted you to see that. After we take it out of the box, I'll do an assembly, although I'm not going to have you sit through the entire assembly process. There are plenty of channels out there that show how to put the Atezr lasers together. The main objective is to get it out of the box, put it together, and then do my first test cuts and let you see how those test cuts go. All right, let's get started. Inside the box on the top, they actually include a stainless steel cutting plate, and that is attached to this little piece of foam. So you do get a stainless steel cutting plate. I actually went to Amazon because I didn't know this, and I bought a stainless steel cutting plate and a honeycomb web to put my build material on. So it does come with one in case you need it right out of the box. Next is a look at the box itself with all the laser components. So there's an install manual. And in the install manual, there's a little warning card about the air assist, and then some information about how to contact Atezr, and some cautions. Makes sense to have cautions with the laser. I think the big one is don't look at the laser. And then it goes step by step on how to assemble the rails and connect the laser head and the gantry and everything else that you need to get the laser put together. So looks like a nice manual that goes step by step, and that's important. It looks like the illustrations are pretty decent, so I see good illustrations on where the screws go and how things line up. It's a good exploded engineering diagram, so very helpful for assembly. I think that looks okay. And it looks like there's a couple of other languages in there too. I see maybe some Spanish and some Russian, maybe a couple of others, maybe some German in there. So nice install manual, it looks pretty good. And then next up is a user guide, and this is a much bigger book. And we've got English, German, French, Italian, Spanish, and Russian. And it talks a little bit about setting your part and selecting your language. I guess this is for the app because they do have an app. That looks like Lightburn to me. I've only casually looked at Lightburn. I haven't really, started really using the tool, but yep, definitely looks like Lightburn there. So a little bit of talk about how to set up Lightburn with the laser and maybe some of the initial cutting procedures you need to follow. And then, of course, it goes into the other languages. So a nice little user guide or beginner guide to get started with the laser and Lightburn. All right, let's start taking the parts out of the boxes. And I don't know what all these parts are because this is the first time I've ever touched a laser. So this looks like some form of control panel. I've got a USB interface, a key, an on-off button. So it looks like this is where you control the operation of the laser. And the material, it's like this. It's kind of like I don't know if it's powder coated, but it's got a little bit of a rough texture to it, but it feels really good and looks good. So I think the powder coating on the outside looks really nice. And that looks to me like a little wireless antenna. So maybe there's wireless connectivity for this laser. Next up is the air assist module, and it's got a little dial on the top so you can turn the air up and down, and that is used, I guess, to cool the parts and keep them from discoloring. So there's an air output, a little compressor output, and a DC 12 volt input jack right there. So very nice little air assist unit. And there's rubber feet to allow it to not slide around on your table, and a cooling fan on the bottom. Here's the little monitor, and it's got a protective cover over the screen, HDMI input on the side there, and again, some rails, so maybe for mounting. Not exactly sure yet. I'm sure we'll figure it out when we get into the build. And this is called the fixed focus block. I think this has to do with how you set the height of the laser over your workpiece. That's what I'm guessing. And that looks like the gantry. So the laser will mount here and the gantry will slide back and forth on the track and then left and right to allow your X and Y movement over your workpiece. And that's a stepper motor, and this looks like the air assist tube. So your air assist will plug in right here, and that'll obviously get connected somewhere near the laser and blow down on the workpiece. So there's the gantry. And next up is the laser itself. This is a very hefty unit, so full-size man hands, and this laser takes up every bit of it. And it's marked right there, 34 to 36 watts on the output, and it's got a wavelength of 455 plus or minus 5 nanometers with a pulse working duration of 1 millisecond and a frequency of 1 kilohertz. Now we've got the frame rail pieces, nice rubber grips on the bottom. They're very grippy. Same powder coat type material or finish on the rails. And I can tell you that the material feels very solid and it looks very straight. So it looks like their machining process is really good. I don't have any complaints about what I see in terms of the machining and how this piece comes out of the box. And of course there's the Atezr logo right on the top. And here's another rail. This looks like this one will move around on the y-axis, so it'll go forward and back. So this looks like one of the side rails. And the reason I say that is because it's got a carriage on there that's connected to a long shaft and a stepper motor to move the carriage back and forth. So this definitely looks like one of the side rails, and then the same type of webbing to go into the hardware with the webbing material to protect your stepper motor wires. Then finally the last side piece, and there's a metal rod attached. I don't know what the heck that's for. We'll figure it out. And again, same carriage on the side there. So yep, just another side piece. The piece looks like it's perfectly machined, no dents, no bruises, and the material is covered well. This is why I did the actual unbox video for you guys, because I wanted you to see just how much care they put into packing this. It's well protected, and I think they've done a very nice job. And in this side pocket's my protection. It's kind of cool. I thought about that, and I thought it might be a good idea to get some. I didn't order any yet. My plan was just not to watch the laser when I activated it, but it's kind of cool that they include eye protection. Very nice touch. The remaining items in the box include the power supply, and this looks like a pretty stout brick. Let's see if the specs are on the bottom here. So this is an input 100 to 240 volt, 50 to 60 hertz, 3 amps, outputs 24 volts, 7.5 amps. Kind of cool. That's a nice little power supply. There's the included power supply cable and an HDMI cable for the monitor, and a 3.5 to 2.5 millimeter audio jack. Not sure what that's for yet. I'm sure we'll figure that out during the build. And they give a little USB cable. I guess that's to connect the PC to the interface, so you can connect Lightburn to the controller. In the last pocket, just a small bag of hardware with a bunch of screw bags, and they're labeled step 1, step 1, step 7, 8, number 9, there's some spares, step 10. I don't see any step 2. Where's step 2? I see step 1. I guess we skip ahead. But anyway, so got some bags that are labeled, and the hardware looks like it's grouped together, so that should definitely help with the assembly process. All right, that's it for the unbox. The box is empty. Let's get this thing out of the way and get on to putting it together. I've got the manual out, and I've got the frame laid down on the table the way the manual shows, and a couple of diagram pictures to show how everything screws together. So I'm just going to go to work putting this rail together, and we'll kind of speed through it. Okay, step 1's complete. The frame is put together. Nothing to write home about there. Basically 4 screws on each corner. And then on the back there are 2 heavier screws. These are M5x14s. Just be on the lookout. They're in a standalone bag, so they're not in the bag with the 16 side screws that go into the corner. So step 1 is done. No issues there. Step number 2 is to install this transfer arm, and a little pro tip, there is a grub screw right down in that hole that you've got to loosen in order to allow that shaft to go in. So here's the pro tip. Go ahead and seat the shaft before you put the rail on the right hand side on the device, and that way you can run it through the grub screw and the bearing on the other side, and you won't risk dropping your grub screw inside the frame. Ask me how I know. The last part of this step is to drive that transfer shaft all the way into the stepper motor on this side. Well, that wraps up my first laser engraving on the Atezr L2 36 watt laser, and all I can say is it works pretty good. I'm an absolute novice at this, and I got this on my very first go. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about assembling the peripherals and a little bit about some of the features that separate the L2 from other lasers on the market. After assembling the laser itself, there are a couple of other things you'll want to do. The first is to connect the air compressor unit so you get that air assist, and that uses that 2.5 to 3.5 millimeter DC jack with the air hose on the back of it, and the other end of that jack plugs in right down here on the bottom of the control unit right here. So that's where that plugs in. And then the other thing is you'll have a power cable that goes to that big brick that we looked at a little bit earlier, and you'll also have a USB connection that will go to your computer, and this is what lets you connect to Lightburn. So Lightburn did recognize the Atezr right away. I didn't have any problems at all seeing the laser printer. I was able to add it automatically. And then the last thing you have is an HDMI connection, and that HDMI connection goes between the control unit and the little screen, and the screen also gets its power from the HDMI unit, which was actually a little surprise to me. I didn't know that was included in HDMI standard, but I guess it is. So just make sure you plug it in far enough, because initially mine wouldn't come on. It was because I didn't have the HDMI plugged in all the way. Also, make note, this is a magnetic base, so you can just set it right here on the side of the control unit, and that keeps it out of the way while you're at the bench working. Atezr did provide a couple of differentiating points between their laser and some of the competition. I thought I'd run through a couple of those. The first one is that it does 5,400 millimeters per minute, which seems to me to be pretty fast, but again, I don't have a frame of reference to compare it against. It also provides auto-focusing on the laser. I actually had to spend a little time figuring that out in Lightburn, and I think I mostly have it sorted out, but here's the key. They give you the instructions in the book on how to set it up in Lightburn. You have to go in the Control tab, set a macro for autofocus, and you simply enter a command called ESP 500, and you have to put that in brackets. So they teach you how to use the autofocus in the book, and so far I've been able to get it to work. The one thing I'd say that you really got to pay attention to in order to get that autofocus to work is that on the right hand side, right over here where this laser light, the crosshatch comes out, there is a little sensor. That sensor has to hit your workpiece, and that activates a Z-limit switch and tells the software where your focal point is. Okay, so that's the key to the whole thing. You can't have the laser touching your frame. You really just need that little switch down on the bottom to make contact with your work surface. So it does have an autofocus, and for me, that's kind of a cool feature, because in 3D printing, having that bed level or that right distance between the print head and the surface, crucially important. So I think it's really cool that they included that on this laser. Another feature I liked about the Atezr quite a bit is the LED power output that's here on the front, so it gives you an indication of how much power is being consumed by the laser and how much power is going out of the laser. So that LED capability up front is really nice. And while I don't have any real experience on the benefits of the air assist, it does make sense to me that if you're burning stuff with a laser, if you can cool it off, it might reduce markings and keep your temperatures down cool so you don't have deformities on the work product. So I'm pretty sure that's what the air assist is for, and the air assist unit does seem to integrate very cleanly with the overall package. I haven't tested the resume cutting option yet, but if you load up a G-code file from the control panel and you begin your cut and you lose power, when you gain power back, you'll be prompted on the control panel to do a resume on your engrave. And I think that's really nice too, especially if you have a lot of time into an engrave when you lose power. The Atezr also includes a flame detector, so if sparks or fire is observed during a cut, I guess it'll secure the laser and turn it off. And then finally is this little 4.3-inch screen, and it does work, it's functional. You can go in and change things like the language, the mode, so you can print fast, standard, or fine. It has a tilt detection, flame detection, which you can turn on and off. We just talked about that. And then you hit these little arrows and you can go on to the next screen, which turns autofocus on and off. And you can turn beeping on and off on the screen. So if you don't want to hear a tone on the screen, you can turn that off as well. And then if you go to page 3, there's a little about screen that you can click on and get information about the firmware and the engraving machine bed size. So that's it on the settings front. And then on the engrave front, if you click on that, it'll find G-code files that you put on the little SD card that comes in the controller. And if you load one of these G-code files up, you'll gain access to the functionality of the laser head itself. So if I just click on this, that loads the file and I can start doing things like moving the print head around. I'll close this video out by showing you a couple of things that I did with the Atezr Laser right out of the gate. So I loaded up Lightburn and I put my little P51 Mustang logo in there, and I actually burned that. It's like a wood engraving on a wood block. So that actually came out really cool. It worked great. And then I also tried to see how well it would cut a 1x2, and it did a pretty good job. I have to fiddle with the settings to kind of learn it a little bit, and I set the power, of course, to 100, and I set it for 2 passes, and I was able to cut through that. And here's a look at some of my earlier attempts where I didn't quite make it through based on the settings. So just by increasing the power and decreasing the head speed a little bit, I was able to make a clean cut all the way through this little 1x2. Overall, the Atezr L2 36-watt laser seems to be a fine piece of equipment. The mechanics were straight and square. I didn't have any problems during assembly. The integration with software, I used Lightburn in my case, was fine. I didn't have any issues setting it up. And connecting the control panel and the integrated air compressor were flawless, no issues at all. And even for a rank novice, I had some success using it right out of the box. So nice little engraving there. I was able to get a little bit of cutting done, and I know I have a lot more testing to do to figure out things like speed and temperature. Rest assured, if you're interested in how laser engravers and cutters can work in the radio control hobby, I will absolutely be using this as we go forward. And as I come up with creative use cases, I'll make sure to share those with you guys so you see what I'm up to. Thanks again, Atezr, for sending this L2 out for review. If you like this kind of content, make sure you smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know when new videos hit the channel. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy and get out there and fly something.